This has been an incredible week, and I have so much gratitude for Mike and all of his efforts. It's been a long time coming. It started out as an ambition to really bring us together to address really the critical moment that we're facing. It's caused me to sort of reflect on this long timeline of how one becomes aware of a situation one is in. And although it probably shouldn't be a living memory, I think my first memory was probably sitting in a car during the gas crisis in the early 1970s in the US, where you would just queue for hours to try and get petrol, which was a sort of, I don't think it was the first American wake-up call, but it certainly addressed the issue of how reliant we are on certain forms of energy. Then I had the sort of dubious pleasure, in, I suppose, circa 1984, 85, of having a school-wide lecture by a then junior senator who was passionate about climate and who spoke at great length about the impending climate crisis with a subdued passion that we all thought was extremely boring. And that person then accelerated through his political career to become Al Gore. Well, he was Al Gore at the time, but we didn't know he would then become what he is today. But if you ever doubt his credentials, he was always talking about the same things. I think it's been fairly recently, even for me, that the alarm has been so loud. I have a now 19-year-old child, and I think I watched the awareness of a climate emergency become really one of the things that kept him up at night. It was the source of nightmares. I think that plus COVID has affected a generation to which you all belong, where this is your future. The question of whether you have your own children who grow up in a world that is threatened by extreme and really unpredictable changes is very, very daunting. And there are many times when, those of us who have that kind of access to, the BBC, the presence of people like David Attenborough, I think left a tremendous impression on a young generation, and still does. But I think the fear is something that is really problematic within a thinking and a design context. I think we don't operate well when we're scared. And I think what this week has been about, which is so incredibly valuable, is coming together to think about what one does. There's so much to worry about in the world, and there's so much to be angry about, and there's so many things to reflect upon that could have been done better. But so much of that is futile if you cannot actually reach forward and find the tools and to find the arena, the forum for a conversation that can allow you to come up with solutions or answers or a response or even a next set of questions. Because if you can't move forward, then you're suddenly just stuck in a cycle of despair. I'm a cheerful pessimist. I like to anticipate the worst and then be pleasantly surprised, but I have enormous optimism about the capacity for the brilliance of the people here in this room, in the wider school, and then in the world more generally, to be resourceful, to think positively, to understand that our capacity to be brilliant and to think incredibly oblique ways can actually find inventive ways of living. We may not solve this problem, but we will find ways of living together within it. And I think this week has been a tremendous testament to the possibility of that conversation. I hope it's the beginning of many, many more. I'm really excited to see the rest of what happens today and to understand the breadth of the social, political, technological, scientific, and imaginative progress that we can all look forward to. So thank you so much. Thank you to Mike, and I'm looking forward to today. So, over to you.
Hi, we're from Intermediate 11, and for Climate Week, this unit took the principle of displacement in its most logical extremes by working hyperlocally with the materials that are present in a specific region, and we created 13 triptychs to explore new ways of acting in the environment.
All the various flows, thank you. All the various flows that surround us at all times, made visible to those seeking awareness within a space located on a point on the map.
Low Earth Clove lends itself to be experienced as a theatre, Etching a labyrinth path into the cliff face reveals a continuous 80 million year record of Earth's geography and climate. As you walk up and down the labyrinth, you are confronted with the site's history and engage with new facets of the present landscape, yourself and others around you.
Cliff erosion, as part of a natural occurrence along the Jurassic coast, has often been overlooked and kept away from the locals and tourists. The coast doctor acts as a first aid team for the eroded cliffs to help it instead of causing danger to people, embraces everyone to utilize it to create a new community based on the eroded cliffs. Earth blocks rammed from the eroded solid and sand will be the main material to be used to form this new coastline around the Jurassic coast.
Seeing the unseen across borders, experiencing touch while walking inside the corridor to gather information about the surroundings. It is the conscious interface between humans and nature.
The exploration of surrealism through the Jurassic coast.
This explores how once upon a time farmland can be reintegrated back into nature through the removal of stone walls and existing subdivisions of the fields. Through the materials gained in the deconstruction process will emerge a new architecture that sits within nature to foster new symbiotic culture between nature and humans.
Site is a wind farm at a Purbeck quarry, exploring architecture and materials that bridge the gap between energy infrastructure being experienced and consciously comprehended by bringing people into a close proximity into spaces creating by extracting, displacing materials hyperlocally.
To allure, to prompt, to constrain, to guide, to liberate. A provocative sequential journey by challenging the degree of visibility within the landscape, to heighten awareness and seek new representations of nature.
Flooding, storms, and sea level rise force humans to take drastic technological interventions. On an unprecedented scale, a series of dams are built in order to drain the English Channel, North and Baltic Seas. Imagine a world where such infrastructures enable self-sufficient communities to live frugally, liberated from world trade and economy. The dams would sustain this way of life by managing water, land usage, and transport.
Exploring past, present, and future within the landscape, creating spaces that give new interpretations of an aspect of the environment, focusing on human perception to distort how we sense and understand the world around us.
Exploring coastal sonic frequencies by immersing oneself in the different tones throughout nature's track.
The strategy above aims to dissect and disassemble lines of cattle slaughter in the abattoir by resensitizing acts of animal slaughter through breaking down the steps of slaughter into individual structures that are made of chalk. The violent acts heighten a person's emotions through a blank slate, like material, the chalk beneath the landscape.
Come from nature, back to nature. A cemetery by the coastline, which features on the special geology and fossil, explores the history of the earth and human life.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Priyanka, and this is Alejandra, and this is Reshma and Elena from Landscape Urbanism. We will be showing you a presentation of what we have developed during Climate Week. Bear with us as we all will be going at a macro scale and a micro scale later. Both of these projects are ongoing projects which we will be developing across the term, and we will dig deeper into the in-betweens. The macro presentation on consequential landscapes were made by Phase 1 students, and the micro soil catalog was initiated by Phase 2 students last year when they started collecting all the samples.
Monoculture hinterlands feed the global urban population through capitalist global trade networks. Rooted in imperial plantations, these industrial productive landscapes entail environmental degradation and exploitative labor practices. Global food systems are responsible for 30% of emissions, and in turn, they are threatened by environmental breakdown affecting the most vulnerable populations. The visualizations presented here depict how global north urban agglomerations, such as the UK cities, are intertwined with these imported hinterland landscapes. These relations are often hidden through their commodification and often behind sustainable city claims. In this video, we propose ways of seeing and uncovering these relationships to bring to the fore urban-rural dependencies. These visions unveil the links between consequential unbuilding or hinterland landscape degradations and their counterpart urban upbuilding, in Mumford's terms. What is the role of landscape-oriented designers within these dynamics? Bananas are one of the highest consumed fruits globally, with Costa Rica being one of the largest exporters of bananas worldwide. USA and UK monopolize plantation ownership. Corporate profit-driven agendas keep banana prices extremely low. Harsh pesticides required for monoculture production account for a third of production costs. Low retail costs for bananas combined with high pesticide use results in poor working conditions for laborers. Similarly, polluted runoff from banana plantations is causing major biodiversity loss. Banana production demands systematic reform. Plantation laborers deserve safe and sustainable working conditions, and national-scale environmental policies must be enforced so the Costa Rican landscape can adapt to our changing climate.
Amazon forests are being burnt to make space for monoculture soy farming, provoking soil degradation, carbon emissions, and environmental pollution. These maps show Brazil's deforestation in the last 20 years. In the past 10 years, nearly 1,000 square kilometers of Amazon rainforest was cleared in the state of Mato Grosso alone. Brazil supplies 40% of global soybean. In the background, you can see livestock units per agricultural land. Netherlands imports 5.6 million tons of soya and exports animal feed to mainly European nations. These countries exchange animal products within the EU and the UK. UK imports 2 million tons of soya cake for animal feed in industrial farms. The complexity of these processed soybean chains leads to a lack of transparency in supply chains.
The cotton industry boomed with demands for raw materials by the Industrial Revolution. 85% of the global cotton production is provided by the 10 top countries and occupies 5% of all cultivated land in the world. The RLC is an example of how, due to cotton irrigation, the former volume shrunk to 10% in 37 years and is now a desert. Cotton production relies on cheap labor, leading to social inequality and exploitation. In India, 14,000 square kilometers of forest were cleared over the last 30 years. We used Nicaragua as an example of the cotton industry impact. By 1965, cotton was grown on 80% of the arable land. There were more than 3,000 annual poisoning cases because of pesticides, some of them leading to death. In 1972, the foreign exchange earned for cotton was $59 million less than the annual cost for social and environmental damages. Nicaragua showed the highest amounts of DDT. Pesticides were found in human tissue.
Rice is the staple food for over half of the global population, key to global food security. China and India alone account for more than half of the global total production. India exports 40% of global rice. UK alone imports 4.5% rice. India's sudden decision to ban rice exports due to erratic monsoons and the convergence of El Niño has far-reaching implications for the country's agricultural and ecological landscape. Excessive rain can lead to flooding, damaging crops, and reducing the overall yield. On the other hand, low rainfall can result in drought-like conditions, severely impacting rice production. The sudden disruption in supply can lead to food scarcity, rising prices, and potential unrest around the world.
In the past 50 years, the global demand for shrimp has increased significantly. In 2022, the global shrimp exports totaled $22.5 billion. With rising demand, farmers worldwide are seeking opportunities to farm shrimp. Most of the shrimp production is occurring in East Asia. This has had a significant impact on the environment. Global warming is the most serious environmental problem we face today. Mangroves are an important part of climate change mitigation. Therefore, mankind needs to work together to solve the major problem of climate warming.
In the United Kingdom, there is a significant demand for the import of vegetables and fruits. The video presents data on the lettuce imports in recent years. The demand for imported lettuce in the UK has been steadily increasing to meet the market's requirements for diversity and supply chain stability. The video also showcases data on Spain's lettuce exports in recent years. However, the production and export of these vegetables have posed a series of challenges to Spain's local natural resources. Large-scale vegetable cultivation exacerbates water scarcity issues, and the extensive use of greenhouses for vegetable production occupies significant land resources, leading to the depletion of forest resources.
The spread of palm oil has its origins in the Atlantic trade. In 1860, Gustave Mann, a gardener from Coegarden, discovered oil palm in the Niger River basin, and in 1911 the Unilever Company was founded and started to open plantations in the colony. Indonesia is now the world's leading exporter of palm oil, accounting for 64.7% of global production. But the industry's rapid expansion means that rainforests are being cut down to make way for new plantations, leading to climate change and biodiversity loss. Palm oil is a key ingredient in a wide range of products from food and beauty to industry. The UK alone imports around 424,000 tons of palm oil every year.
Forest carbon credit refers to an environmental financial instrument that rewards forest conservation and sustainable forestry management to reduce the atmospheric greenhouse gas emissions, particularly carbon dioxide. It is an ecological compensation mechanism. Currently, the EU has a large carbon market. Sweden has a rich and well-developed production forest landscape, with large forest carbon stocks and a high number of carbon credits from all forests. This allows Sweden to sell its carbon credits to other industrial countries with high carbon emissions, such as the United States, Canada, and Germany. A carbon market industry chain has been formed.
Yeah, so we've been working to build a soil atlas to understand landscapes much better. We've collected samples from all over the UK, and when you dive deeper into the soil and look at its horizons, you start to understand the implications of climate change on the soil and how these systems are actually intricately connected. We visited Hook Park and sampled the soil, and so when you test it with water and how porous it is and things like that, you understand how rich the soil is, how susceptible it is to flooding, how susceptible it is to erosion. You can also, when you observe it under the microscope, the soil literally comes alive, and you begin to understand that the ground is not something lifeless, but full of other living organisms that we've not begun to understand. We also document the kind of tools we use to understand and study soil, which apply differently depending on the kind of conditions they are in. The different processes that we use to we prepare them as catalogs. And we also work very closely with local activists and members of the community in order to build relationships that help the program across the years. From the same, we understand countries as administrative boundaries, but within the same country, we have very, very different types of landscapes, which is reflected directly in the soil, the kind of parent rock, and the kind of organic matter within them. How angular the soil is or how porous it is changes a lot of the things that, in terms of the proposals we propose and the kind of landscape strategies we work on in the program. So in terms of livestock management or forest strategies that we use, in terms of rewilding, every policy that we talk about needs to be informed by all the scales of intervention.
where the new forest should come in, which soil is suitable for what kind of activity, and all of those aspects also considered. We prepared one project that was done in the past, looked at preparing a catalog for the community to take up and build on further. Other projects have looked at trying to make that catalog more accessible to people. And years later, we do go back to the same people we've worked with in the past and then work on further projects and building that further. So we just want to show you a live sample of what it looks like under the microscope to understand better.
So hello, this is one of, so here we have the microscope. We work we work like through very different scales, and we have this global maps that you saw in the beginning. So in order to see how that works, we have to do this drastic change into a smaller one. So this is 40 times, this is 10 times, so this is 400 times magnification of what's happening in the ground. So we want to also the work with the discourses, not only political, but also like the scientific ways of digesting information and see through them and try to contest how to represent this. This soil, we retrieved it this morning from Bedford Square. So we want to test to see what is the life that it's actually engaging in this climate matters week today. So I've been trying to follow up a little worm that was around here. But these are organisms, if you can see the here, for example, this is a piece of mycorrhiza that are these networks that go below the trees to transfer all the nutrients and minerals that plants need, and we have them right here. So in order to contest this and to explore other forms of visualization and how to engage with how these landscapes at this scale work, we try to put together how these manuals that we have here, the samples that we have retrieved for the past 4 years, work together to make this atlas of materials, but also of knowledges that we share through different generations. So I think if you look very closely, some of these things are vibrating because they're live bacteria. And before there were things moving around, but as you know, this is a very diverse and moving environment, and sometimes we cannot. It failed. But yeah, thank you.
We could stay there for a minute, and maybe we can open a discussion.
There's one last part missing.
Okay.
Yeah. As students of 2023, we were very intrigued by the soil inventory that was available from past students. What is produced now and what was produced before is to be shared. We believe in a collective effort and an ongoing investigation which serves as reference for all future generations. We thought it was relevant to be able to see them, compare them, and take care of them. These panels are conceptualized as a modular system. They are categorized by sites, depth, and samples, and types of matter. As you can see, the panels, there are many slots. Many of them are left empty. We see this as an ongoing project where students can add any relevant information on it. We also added different tools used on these sites that helped to look at the soil in depth. So we invite you whenever you can to take a look at the panels because it's quite interesting. Thank you very much.
What we've seen seems to be two opposite ends of a very long spectrum, although I'm struck by the boldness of the proposition to dam off the English Channel and turn it into a new ecological territory. So on the one hand, we're seeing proposition very early, and as it develops, I'm guessing you're going to work things out. On the other hand, we're seeing global scale analysis and the beginning of, I think for the first time in the AA, a biological sample archive. So If anyone would like to question them or add to that? Maybe you could start by commenting on theirs and they can comment on yours.
Well, I took biology class a long time ago, but I do think it's interesting how far away the small things seem. Like this could be taken out of context and be sort of otherworldly, but it's quite literally grounding. And I think that what we, in our projects, we've been speculating on what we could do to inspire environmental consciousness. I mean, that is the brief that we have. And I think in a few of our projects, we've been thinking about these like unseen networks and unseen network or systems that are occurring, and quite literally seeing them now, and how could this sort of thing be put, like what are these steps of getting like something like this into a more human scale and perceivable thing, sort of that could be experienced maybe within architecture, but also within architectural education.
I can jump just I don't know if so. For example, these first observations on soil were part of one of the photos that Reshma showed. That was when we met a Welsh farmer who wanted to build up a legacy on knowledge, and he said that he was trying his best to engage with the climate emergency, but he needed someone to. He needed the next generations to get his knowledge, because that's the bit he could do. And when we sat with him, we also saw that each one of us as architects, I'm a soil scientist, but I joined this program as well, have this little knowledge that put together can build up this world piece by piece. So for example, his knowledge in this type of drawings was just a small part on how to make a design that, for example, a labor-intensive management of woodlands would enhance the biodiversity, because big machinery, they expose these materials to the sun, to the water, to floods. So when you engage with this conversation, in these projects, like as an architectural drawing, that it's more a process than a fixed image, then these forms of monitoring and observing and see how step by step you produce the landscapes that you want to envision, then it's a side-by-side work that works through time.
To just sort of add to that, I think as architects, it's possible to find a way that we can define how we coexist with these systems of nature. In maybe the past few years, we have tried to disrupt those systems because we haven't considered what we don't know. And now that we know that there have been dire implications of what we have done, it's more prudent to design in knowledge of those systems and try to find a way where these communities can start to exist. Like, we're not outside of nature. We are still part of nature. So in the past, communities have lived without causing a climate crisis. So I think to sort of redefine the way we design our lives and food systems and all of these things that affect us so closely is probably what we're trying to do in all sort of scales that we can.
You've already heard from me, but I get really excited about these projects. I really love to see propositional work early in a project, because it exposes a vulnerability in your own thinking. It's never the perfect idea, but actually it's pretty close to what you might end up with at the end, because your instincts can be very strong. A lot of knowledge doesn't always make a better project, but a lot of knowledge is necessary to support a good project. And I think you're doing some fantastic research. I mean, you're exposing some things, some of which we know a little about, some of which we know a lot about. the world is this crazy place where parts of nations, whole nations are devoted to single monocultures. Things that are supposed to keep us healthy, like soy and bananas and almonds, and are actually destroying whole environments that are beyond our kind of actual daily experience. And this is a function of, decades, if not centuries, of colonization, of global trade. And then there's these really perplexing questions about, if we really live in a responsible way and we farm in a responsible way and woodlands are managed in responsible ways and actually we eat in responsible ways, we're actually, we're talking about a kind of first world austerity that no one's really experienced, or enforced self-restraint. And I think that there's this kind of moral component of what do we do in our architecture that reveals what really it is to live in a responsible manner. What does a sustainable environment, a sustainable neighborhood, a sustainable wardrobe, a sustainable diet really look like? And I think that's where this question of being propositional is that you're doing essentially, what Margaret Atwood, who you know from kind of Handmaid's Tale, but I reread recently the Mad Adam trilogy, which is deeply depressing, and I don't know why I reread it because it was just kind of horrific. But she's projecting a really kind of horrific, kind of apocalyptic future, but from a very interesting scientific basis. But you're telling a story of what you're showing us, both through the work that you're doing and through eventually the work that comes out of the research that you're doing, what the reality of responsible life might be. And I think that's incredibly exciting. What I'm loving about your work is that it also has a kind of an architectural confidence, and there's a level of excitement where making people aware of a climate condition can also be an opportunity for extraordinary space, or an extraordinary experience of landscape, or an unexpected reunification with Europe, which would be even better. So really interesting crossover. Very, very different, but super interesting crossover.
And I'd just like to say something about oak trees, which originated in Spain and were brought over to this country. They are now, with their memory in the cells of the trees, are readapting to become like they were originally in Spain. And so I think the cyclical nature of a tree is a really good paradigm to work from, because it doesn't deal with averages. It deals with moments of change that are continual. The problems from architecture in the period that we are so distressed about dealt with averages. Humans were 2 parents and 2 children, and housing was debated on that basis. And I think that way of thinking has actually been very problematic. And I think it's actually wonderful you're dealing at a cellular level.
And before we move on, for me, this is an ideal scenario for the AA for the future, where we have proposition and research at the same table and in conversation. Thank you.